Welcome to Chapter 15. We are going to discuss interpersonal and organizational communication and how you can master the exchange of information between yourself and others, both one-on-one and in groups. So take good notes. This will, of course, be on an exam. Alrighty, let's jump right in. So some major questions that you should be able to answer by the time you're done reading Chapter 15 is what do you need to know about communication process to be an effective communicator? How can you use different channels and patterns of communication to your advantage? What are some of the important barriers that you need to be aware of so that you can improve your communication skills? And how do contemporary managers use IT to communicate more effectively? And how you can be a better listener, reader, writer, and speaker. So let's define communication and then go from there. So basically it's the transfer of information as well as understanding of that information from one person to another. So you have some information, and it's not just that you just exchange that. It's not just transferring that, but it's based on how you interpret and understand that information. That is communication. And you spend about 81% of your time in a typical day as a manager having to communicate with other people. That's a lot of time. So if you are a poor communicator, that can mean a great amount of your time is being spent transferring information, and based on your understanding of that information or based on how well you share it, you can either empower and excel individuals and information and projects, or you can hinder and derail the progress, as well as possibly beat down on people's self-esteem through the course of a day. So having a bad day and bringing it to work, you can see how that can negatively impact the workplace. So let's look at how the communication process unfolds. As the sender, I'm going to share some information that's called a message, and you are the recipient of that message. While I'm sending that message, I have to take in consideration whether or not you're going to fully understand what it is that I'm trying to say, what I'm trying to convey. And this is the process of encoding, where a message is going to be translated into symbols or language that the recipient can understand. And then as the recipient, you are going to try to interpret and make sense of that message, and that's the process of decoding. There are various ways in which we do this. The medium is the pathway that the message travels. So is it through email, letter, text? Is it a verbal face-to-face? Is it body language? A written letter, a postcard, billboard, whatever. Ad, by radio, print. What is that pathway that we're going to use? And then there has to be some form of feedback. And that's where you as the recipient, you're going to express what you feel, what you think, what you believe that my message is conveying. And what usually causes us conversation and communication issues is the noise that comes into play. And that's any disturbances that interfere with the transmission of a message. So that can be a phone call, a text, it can be the microwave oven, it could be your children, your spouse, it could be an airplane overhead, someone barging into your office, anything, the television, anything that can disturb you, that can interfere with that message conveying properly. Noise could also be depression, sickness, a number of things. Hunger can be noise. So let's look at this. Rachel and Alexa are on their cell phones. They're talking. After Rachel reads her phone number, Alexa repeats the number back to Rachel. Is this an example of feedback, encoding, decoding, or medium selection? Which one? They're talking on the phone. After Rachel reads her a number, Alexa repeats the number back to Rachel. Correct answer is A, feedback. I got the message. I'm Alexa. I have the message. I'm reading it back to Rachel. That's the feedback that I get from the message. Now let's look at figure 15.1. You can also see this in your textbook. This is the communication process outlined. So there's the sender that encodes a message using whatever medium they choose. That message is then being transmitted through, let's say, telephone or email, whatever. So I'm saying, did you finish your assignment? The receiver decodes the message and decides if feedback is needed. That's key. Just because you get the message doesn't mean that you're going to provide feedback. And then you say to me as the student, what assignment do you mean? Then you're going to express your reaction or feedback through that same medium. What happens is there could be some noise that interferes, and so it can be anything. It could just be the fact that you're nervous, right? And my face may look very upset, and you may actually get a little thrown off. But it can be anything that disturbs that transmission flow. So how do we go about selecting the right medium? You have to look at the richness of the medium, how well it conveys the information and promotes actual, not just learning, but retention of that information. And you can choose based on how in depth in the message is, how quickly you need to get the message to a person, the seriousness of it, things of that nature. So a rich medium is really good for non-routine situations and to avoid oversimplifying the message being conveyed. Lean medium is best for routine situations. There's some, repetition that's going on. It's a day-to-day. You're accustomed to it. And you do this so that you don't overload the person, the recipient, with more messaging. Our formal communication channels are, you have your vertical, which is any communication that goes upward and downward, right? Along the chain of command. And that's not just within business, but in the household as well, right? All right, but sticking with business, you have vertical communication that can flow upward from your front end team members all the way up to your senior managers. And they can also flow downward. Horizontal means it's lateral, it's sideways. And so that is usually within a department, within a chain of command, meaning the CEO and the CFO speaking laterally, or the CFO and the CIO speaking laterally amongst themselves. Managers within that are on the same level of command, communicating laterally. Externally is when you're having communication outside of the organization. So with your clients, customers, vendors, the community at large, media, government, so on and so forth. So Jeremy shares some information with some other members on his task force about the project they're all working on. Is he communicating externally, downward, upward, or horizontally? The answer is D, horizontally. Speaking, the fellow task force members, everyone's on an even playing scale. There's no chain of command, no formal chain of command. That's all horizontally. Now, here's some various types of downward and upward communication. I've shared an example already, but let's look at some more. Table 15.1. Let's see. Instructions related to a particular job task. So you have a supervisor speaking to one of their team members, and they say the store will close Monday for inventory. All employees are expected to participate. This is the kind of information where you have most downward communication, right? Also, your feedback about a team member's performance. That is downward communication. Upward communication is when you're reporting on the progress of a project that you're working on, or suggestions for improvements within the company, or a process within a company, organization. Looking at our informal, so we looked at formal, let's look at our informal communication channels, is when your ability to develop outside the formal structure and you don't need to follow chain of command. Very simple. I don't need to have something go all the way up to the top in order for something to be conveyed or communicated. It's just an informal process. So that could be grapevine, which that's the unofficial communication system, right? It could be, grapevine can also fall into gossip. Management by wandering around. Literally, a manager just walking around on the floor, walking around the office, walking around the property, and just talking with people randomly. It's no one in particular. It's not a specific group. It's not a specific chain of command. It is just you wander around and you just talk to anyone. There are some barriers, of course, to communication. We have our physical, semantic, and personal barriers. Physical, of course, would be time and space, sound, things of that nature, the tangibles of life. And of course, sound not tangible, but as far as the things that can literally stop us in our tracks. Time can definitely do that, right? You can run out of time. It could be a case of you can't communicate with someone because it's 4 o'clock in the morning their time, although it may be noon yours. Let's see, semantic barriers. Literally, when words matter, you can't risk something not translating the right way. You can't risk using a phrase, terminology, slang, or anything that can have a dual meaning outside of the group or culture that you're accustomed to using that phrase or terminology with. And any personal barriers or anything, any kind of personal attributes, quirks that can actually hinder your communication. Your own insecurities, inferiority complexes, so on and so forth. So here's what happens within the process. When you have the sender has a barrier, then no message gets out. So if you're afraid to voice your opinion or voice an idea because you fear criticism, then you're not going to share that idea. An encoding barrier is when the message was not expressed correctly. So if your vocabulary is lacking or if English is not your first language, or the language that you're speaking in is not your first language, you may have extreme difficulty expressing to anyone what you're trying to say. So then the message is encoded improperly, which means it's going to be decoded improperly. A medium barrier is when that communication channel is totally blocked, right? The computer network is down, internet is down, your phone line is busy. There's no way for a person to be able to reach you through that medium. I already shared with you the decoding barrier. Receiver barrier, just literally the recipient doesn't get the message. And it could be because you weren't paying attention, right? You were talking to someone else, you were distracted, whatever it is, you weren't listening. And so you didn't get the message. And then feedback barrier is when the recipient doesn't respond enough. So, for instance, you give someone directions and they nod their heads as though they understand what you're saying, but they don't repeat those directions back to you. So you really don't know whether or not they understood. So I'm telling you what's needed for a project or assignment, and you are nodding as though you got it. And you're like, or you're even saying, okay, all right, okay. But you're not taking the time to repeat back to me what I've said to you. So I have no clue if whether or not you really understood, other than the verbal noises that you made or assurances that you seem to have given me. So if Greg was thinking about how he just did on his test, when his management professor talked about tomorrow's quiz, he's thinking about how he did on his economics test when his management professor is talking about tomorrow's management quiz. Is this an example of encoding, decoding, medium, or receiver barrier? He's in his management class, thinking about his economics test. That's another class. His management instructor is talking about tomorrow's management quiz. What barrier is presented for Greg? Is it A, B, C, or D? If you said D, you're correct. It is a receiver barrier. He's not even getting the message. It's not because it's not. The medium isn't blocked. It's just simply the fact that he is preoccupied thinking about something else. He's not listening. So let's look at our semantics. And I mentioned this briefly earlier. Semantics is the study of the meaning of words. What does words mean exactly? And how the word that you use and what you believe the meaning to be versus what the recipient believes it to be. And then jargon is our terminology specific to a particular profession or group. So we have legal jargon, medical jargon, business jargon, sports jargon, football jargon, basketball jargon, so on and so forth. Let's look at our personal barriers. I mentioned some of these earlier. I mentioned some personal barriers, but an oversized ego can be a huge personal barrier, right? You think you know it all, you think you can do it all, you think you don't need anyone's help, blah, blah, blah. How information is processed and interpreted. There's so many different variations, and that can create a personal barrier. Having really weak listening skills. You hear, but you're not listening, or you're listening just to respond. Your tendency to judge other people and the messages and how they are relaying those messages. Your inability to listen with understanding, and any stereotypes and prejudice that you may have can serve as personal barriers. Our nonverbal communication can be just as or more impactful than our verbal communication, because it is the use of our eyes and facial expressions, body movements and posturing, gestures, touch, and those all have nothing to do with written or spoken word. So the rolling of our eyes, the sucking of our teeth, the crossing of our arms over our chest or our waist, or how we shift our legs, or flip our hair, whatever the case may be, all of those can have a major impact, positively or negatively. So, some ways in which you can use your nonverbal skills in a positive way is making sure that you maintain eye contact, leaning toward the speaker, speaking at a moderate rate, speaking in a quiet, reassuring tone, smiling and showing animation, occasionally nodding your head in agreement, and being aware of your facial expression. So that means that you're not going to be licking your lips, biting your nails, playing with your hair. Licking your lips can put someone in an LL Cool J moment real quick. Biting your nails may make someone think that you're nervous or you have some kind of weird tic. Playing with your hair could be flirtatious, or people will think that you have some kind of nervous condition. When you close your eyes when someone's speaking, it can send the message that you're not interested, that you're tired, or that there may be some kind of barrier mentally that you have. When you yawn excessively, once again, tired, not interested, speaking too quickly or too slowly. I can speak very, very quickly, and I have to remember to slow down, especially when I know that I'm speaking about concepts that are unfamiliar to other people, or if I'm speaking to someone who English is not their first language, or if they are of a culture or from a place where fast speaking is not a prevalent communication way to communicate. Speaking too slowly can actually irritate people that speak at moderate or fast tones or rates. Looking away from the speaker versus maintaining eye contact can be deemed a sign of disrespect. Now, I will say that in some cultures, maintaining eye contact for too long can also be a sign of disrespect. So you have to go based on cultural standards as well. Now, here's some communication differences, and we're looking at linguistic characteristics first from men versus women, and that's on table 15.4. You'll notice that men will take credit using the word I, more likely to boast about their own personal and professional achievements, while women have a greater use of the word we and less likely to boast about their achievements. So we'll say we did this, we did that, and men usually have a greater propensity to say I did. The displaying of confidence. Women are more likely to indicate a lack of certainty about an issue, while men are less likely to do. Men will actually display a greater confidence in an issue or area, even if they are totally clueless about it. Women are more likely to ask questions than men are, and women are more likely to say they're sorry more frequently, while men will avoid making apologies because it puts them at a somewhat, in their mind, disadvantage. You feel weaker when you have to apologize. When you look at giving feedback, men are more direct, blunt, to the point, while women tend to temper their criticism. They try to actually sweeten it up with a little praise, sugarcoat things, more tactful, more considerate of how it can impact someone's feelings. When it comes to giving compliments, women tend to pay more compliments than men do. And women are more indirect when telling others what to do, while men are indirect when it comes to admitting fault or when they don't know something. So you can see how the different ways of communicating and making sure that you take in consideration. And it's not all men or all women, but you will notice that basically this is how our families and society have helped mold us and shape us, that we find ourselves having these various linguistic characteristic differences between the genders. So there's evidence that women are more superior at multitasking and better at relationships, which is very important when you're developing teams, because you have to be able to work with different people, working on different things basically at the same time or with little gaps in between time, and being able to build upon relationships and establish a strong rapport with people so they have greater confidence in you and the projects and the things and the task and the mission that you're working on. Women are also more likely and willing to share information than men are, which with the ability to share information means that everyone can move forward on certain things. You can actually be able to find solutions to problems, be able to identify various issues easier, figure out what was going wrong, when it was going wrong, and move forward as far as progressing forward on various tasks at hand. When you're less willing to share information, you can actually find yourself with greater obstacles and barriers. So looking at communication, the information age, that's the age that we're in now, we have to learn how to multi-communicate. And that's where we're using technology to participate in several interactions at the same time. So, we have our web interface and our instant messaging and social media, emails, phone, face-to-face, so many different ways. And we have what is considered the millennial or the internet generation. There's some norms that they have found to be the ongoing way in which millennials communicate. And there's a sense of a desire to experience new and different things. There's a freedom, and this is a norm. And so there's a higher propensity to not lean more towards long-term commitments, wanting more flexibility. So you'll see more millennials that have that job hop. So they may not stay with a company for multiple years. They may stay for a year or less, 2 years or less. And so there's a desire for freedom of choice, freedom of being able to go wherever, do whatever, experience whatever. Customization and having personalized products and choices. Scrutiny, not taking facts and authority figures at face value. So there's more probing of people of authority. They're checking things out, being skeptical, questioning everything. Integrity and being able to trust in people and employers and products are important. Collaborating with others. This generation values volunteering. And so they're also very eager to share their opinions and suggestions, while you may have some older generations who were taught to limit their opinions and suggestions, right? A sixth norm would be entertainment. Fun, entertaining, interesting, and using the internet has made this more of a mainstay, because now you're able to have videos and music and other resources at your disposal using the internet. Also, goodness, you can go to Instagram and spend your entire day watching comedians do their skits and stand-ups. The seventh norm would be speed, that ability to get that instant feedback. This is the what I call the microwave generation. So everything is rapid fire. And then your eighth is innovation. So it's always wanting something new, different. And so the workplace rejects the traditional hierarchy and is more focused on collaboration and creativity. So you'll see a lot of startups that aren't focused on having this CEO who sits at the top and, you know, everyone just kind of jumps into play and everything has to go through this chain of command. You'll notice that in a lot of internet generation based companies, the newer startups with, you know, millennials involved, you'll see that things are more group focused. So when we look at digital communication in the new workplace, I mentioned this earlier, we have our video conferencing, telepresence technology, which allows you to simulate face-to-face meetings between users, and everything is I have yet to see new laptops and desktops that are not including a webcam already embedded within. Some benefits of telecommuting versus working in the office space. You can reduce your overhead because you're now not paying for the square footage of having those workers in your office. You can increase flexibility and autonomy for your workers so they have more flexible hours, flexibility in how they do their work, and more say in when the work gets done. It provides a competitive advantage when you're recruiting because you're then able to get a larger pool of candidates to compete for a job, which also means that you can actually hire more people and get products and services delivered to the marketplace at a faster, better, more efficient rate than your competitors. There's an increase in job satisfaction. Oftentimes, you come into the office space, the workplace, and with all of the energies of all the different people in there, you can actually have a greater risk of conflict and tension and stress, which leads to sickness and absenteeism and turnover. Productivity can increase for the reasons I've already shared, and you're able to actually reach some non-traditional workers. Some downsides to digital age is that you leave your company exposed to different attacks and threats from hackers, things that I say such, as well as natural disasters, any kind of failures of the system, power outages, any kind of glitches in technology, mishaps that can cause damage or loss. Identity theft, where your name, the identity of your employees and customers and clients could actually be impacted, or an employee using the company's computer for a personal reason could turn around and have their email or the portal in which they're using to make online purchases could be hacked, and that can actually compromise not only the employee but the company itself. So the way that you can go about protecting security and privacy breaches is to make sure that passwords cannot be easily guessed, and that you're using a combination of different letters and symbols and upper and lowercase letters, making sure that you don't use the same password for multiple sites. Some people will use the same password for all of their sites. So if a hacker figures out one password and then they realize that you use the same one, then they will have a field day with you. Making sure that you don't reveal sensitive information on social networking that can possibly be used to determine any kind of security and privacy screenings that you already have set in play. Making sure that you pay attention to free and illegal downloads, knowing that certain file sharing programs contain spyware, and as do different downloads for songs, movies, and TVs. So that means that your computer and all of your personal information can be exposed, and that there are some liability issues. So a lot of employers do oftentimes monitor your email, your web browsing, and the where you are or how you're using your computer and how often. And so you can actually expose them to various lawsuits, and making sure that you keep antivirus software updated on your computer so that you can limit the attacks from various viruses that can be installed. There are some advantages and disadvantages of using email. Some disadvantages are that the greater the use, the less connected you will feel to your coworkers. You could be sitting right next to them and realize that you communicate less now face-to-face verbally than you do through email. And the written language is becoming very sloppy over the past 20 years. And with that, messages that you are trying to encode are not necessarily decoded the way that you intend, and you can actually cause a lot of grief based on the way a sentence was written or an emoji was displayed. Hence why emojis are frowned upon in the workplace. So some tips for better email handling: be careful with the sharing of jokes and being informal. Try to not be sloppy in your spelling and grammatical errors. And at the same time, please don't criticize others for their sloppiness. And remembering that not everything should be discussed via email. Some things are better to be said in person or by phone to prevent misunderstandings. Now, we have our smartphones, and a lot of people don't realize that your smartphone is a computer. So, making sure that you guys are being mindful of that it is not an extension of your body. It is not another appendage. So, making sure that when you're using your phones, that you keep your voice down. You don't need to shout. You know, it's amazing. We all do it. We don't think we do, but we do. Certain private conversations should not be shared in public. Make sure that when you're in a meeting, a public event, that you turn your ringer off or you set it to vibrate. If it is within an office or a small space, just turn the ringer off altogether, because vibrate will sound as though it is a jackhammer. Don't text during meetings or any kind of conversations that you may have. Try not to do it in dates. I mean, when you have date night with your significant other, try to also put your phone away. And of course, don't dial or text while driving. I think we all blunder that one, but let's work on that. And this also means don't dial or text or email while driving. Now, let's make sure we put that in there. That also includes no social media posting while driving. All right. So let's look at the pros and cons of social media. Since I just mentioned that, we have our internet-based and our mobile technologies. Instagram was created to be mobile only. Of course, you can access internet-based, but that they really want to keep you on your phone. And so we think of the Snapchats and Twitters, Facebooks, as well as our LinkedIn. And we have our crowdsourcing, and that's where you can get various ideas and services, content from various sources using community-based platforms like Facebook, Twitter, and the such. Excuse me. And let's not confuse that with crowdfunding. Crowdfunding is where you go out and get a group of people to help make a contribution or donation to your cause or project. Now, there are downsides of social media is you can leave the wrong impression. It can be a distraction for you or the recipient. It can actually replace real conversation. There are a lot of people that have really not had a actual one-on-one healthy conversation in months because they do everything using social media. Most of us stop picking up the phone to make calls. We're not sending out pictures. We're not writing letters. We're not sending postcards. Why? Because we put everything on social media. What do I need to do that for? I'll just post it to be done. Covers everything. Matter of fact, I can tag the 25 people I want to know, and there you go. So when you're using Facebook in your personal life, make sure your updates are relevant. Remember that all wall posts are public, and this is what we're talking about. It's not private. Private is private. The moment you share it with other people, it becomes public. So don't write anything that you don't intend for public consumption. Why? You may think, well, only people that are on here are my friends and family. But the thing is that if they repost yours, it then extends to their friends and family. Or then someone else has to do is just copy and paste it or screenshot it. And there you go. And make sure that if you ask any questions on any wall posts, that you follow up and respond to any feedback that you receive. Right? So let's think about your listening style. Or do you listen just to rebut and come back with your say in something? Or are you appreciative? Where you're listening to be amused, or where you're tuning into the speaker's emotions because you're an empath, right? Are you focused on their logic? It's a comprehensive style. You're really zooming in on where they're coming from. Do you focus on the main message, or are you just in the stance of challenging whatever the speaker says? So are you discerning or evaluating? So here's some tips. Table 1510 shares some tips for being an effective listener. Make sure that you always show respect. You listen from the very beginning. You turn off those internal thoughts, which is very difficult to do, and I am guilty of it myself. But you're listening from the very first moment a person opens their mouth and starts speaking. You're mindful and focused on what they're saying. Don't try to figure out where they're going with the conversation. Just listen to them. Staying quiet. Right? The 80-20 rule. You should your partner should be able to speak 80% of the time, and you should speak 20% of the time. I'm bad at this as well. Asking questions that are to clarify, not to attack, not to scrutinize, but to clarify, so that not only are you demonstrating that you're listening, but you're actually able to give that feedback needed in the encoding process, so that the sender knows that they decoded it properly. Or vice versa. That they encoded it and that you decoded it properly. My apologies. Paraphrase and summarize. So you're going to repeat back what you heard. Once again, this is to convey that you understood it correctly, not because you're about to go on an attack mode. And making sure that when you're doing so, that you're using the tone that is not confrontational, right? But it's just conveying that you understand. Remembering what was said. So either you need to take notes, or you need to make an effort to log any critical information into your mental computer so that you can remember what was said, so that if anything needs to be clarified or anything needs to be followed up on, you can do so. And making sure that you use nonverbal cues to help demonstrate both interest and involvement in the conversation. And making sure that you're not using any negative nonverbal cues that could actually send a mixed message. So how we can be an effective reader. So realizing the speed does not, the speed reading doesn't work. It does not work when you're talking about in the professional environment, even in personal. Now, if you want to speed read for leisure of a book, that's on you. But the moment you start talking about communication between you and someone else, don't speed read. You need to read from the top to the bottom. All right? SQ3R, survey, question, read, recite, review. Survey, question, read, recite, review. Read more about that in your chapter 15. So here's some 5 steps to better reading. You're going to rate the reasons to read from why you should read it, will reading it contribute to your goals, how will it make you better, so on and so forth. Question and predict your answers so that you can get answers to your questions. Survey the big picture. Take a few minutes to get an overview so you'll be better able to read with purpose. Skim for main ideas. And this is very key in when you guys are reading the textbook, right? It's similar to surveying, but it's on a smaller scale. You're going to look for the essence of a subsection of a paragraph, zoom right in, and then it helps you kind of bring your mind and wrap your mind around what is being said in the letter or the chapter or whatever, the proposal. And then you're going to summarize as you skim. So you're going to verbally restate or write notes on those main points using your own words, not using the same words, right? You're trying to help summarize it to make it process the information quicker. And then while you're doing that, you'll be answering your initial questions that you had as you skim the material. Now, being an effective writer, don't ever show your ignorance, all right? Don't show your ignorance, all right? Write from your strengths, not from your weaknesses. Understanding your strategy before you write and making sure that when you start to write, you write with a purpose. Every person, no matter if they're reading a document, a book, we want to know why. Why are you writing this? What is the purpose of this document, of this book, of this email? And make sure that when you're writing, it's simple, it's concise, it's to the point. And that it has a powerful layout, right? It's not all jumbled up together. There has to be some white space, meaning there needs to be a separation by paragraphs. But let it not be, 5-inch paragraphs. That's distracting. So making sure that there's a powerful layout, that it's well written, that the font is a good size, that it's nothing that is too outrageous, but that it has an ebb and flow. Making sure that as an effective speaker that you tell people what you're going to say. You say what you're going to say, and then you tell them again what you said so that it's clear. This is what I'm going to discuss today. Then I'm going to say exactly what I said I was going to say, and then I'm going to recap that so that we're all on the same page. So, with that, jump right into chapter 15. All right. Clearly, you won't be physically jumping. So when we talk about semantics, right, we just finished discussing semantics. So you understand that I'm using a figure of speech. So read chapter 15. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me. All right. And I will talk with everyone soon. Have a great day.